Hey guys, this is Harvest is Plenty, and preparations are underway every single day, every moment. They are preparing mankind for the arrival of the ancient Babylonian and Egyptian deities, the return of the gods, who's nothing more than the return of the demons and the fallen angels that was there before the flood and was after the flood as well.
Good morning. My name is Carol Rosen. In 1974, after being a sixth grade school teacher, I was introduced to the late Dr. Wernher von Braun, in the U.S. the father of rocketry. In my first meeting with him, during that first 3.5 hours, he said to me, "Carol, you will stop the weaponization of space." And I said, teachers don't stop until June. He said, "No, you have to understand, this is February. And we have to prevent the weaponization of space because there is a lie being told to everyone that the weaponization of space is now first being based upon the evil empire, the Russians. There are many enemies," he said, "against whom we're going to build this space-based weapon system. The first of whom was the Russians, which was existing at that time. Then there would be terrorists. Then there would be third world countries. Now we call them rogue nations or nations of concern. Then there would be asteroids." And then he would repeat to me over and over, and the last card would be the extraterrestrial threat. Well, at the time, I kind of laughed when he said asteroids, and when he said extraterrestrials, I knew I wasn't going to deal with that subject. And now we hear on the news just today, this week, that they've slid in another enemy. Only this time we're going to protect our satellites. In other words, we have to have some reason to spend these trillions, to waste these dollars on a space-based weapon system, and they're all lies.
There is an asteroid discovered in December 2004 called Apophis, named for the Egyptian god of death and darkness. It was named only after its trajectory was identified to intersect that of Earth. So, we get the orbit. Turns out, in the year 2029, the month of April, the 13th of April, a Friday, Apophis will come so close to Earth that it will dip below our orbiting communication satellites. And it is the size of the Rose Bowl. It'll be the largest, closest thing we have ever observed to come by Earth. If the asteroid goes through the middle of that keyhole, it will hit the Earth 13 years later. It will hit the Earth. 500 kilometers due west of Santa Monica.
500 kilometers due west of Santa Monica.
Well, for decades, only crackpots and crazy people believed in UFOs. That's what I thought anyway. And then in recent years, it turns out that governments have been taking them seriously all along. Very seriously.
The performance characteristics exceed anything in our own inventory. And that, by the way, was the conclusion in this Pentagon document. This thing ran rings around our F-18 Super Hornets that tried to chase this thing. It was briefly tracked on radar, but then it seemed to be able to, and this again is a phrase from the document, it's almost like it cloaked itself and became invisible. You'd think this was science fiction if you weren't reading it in Pentagon documents. And we know now, which we didn't know before, that the government took this very seriously, and these things are being seen in our skies, whatever they might be, by pilots tracked on radar, and there's a serious defense and national security issue here. This is real.
This is real.
Today's report calls for the creation of a new unified combatant command for space, the United States Space Command. This new command structure for the physical domain of space, led by a 4-star flag officer, will establish unified command and control for our Space Force operations, ensure integration across the military, and develop the space warfighting doctrine, tactics, techniques, and procedures of the future.
It is not enough to merely have an American presence in space. We must have American dominance in space. So important. Very importantly, I'm hereby directing the Department of Defense and Pentagon to immediately begin the process necessary to establish a Space Force as the 6th branch of the armed forces. That's a big statement. We are going to have the Air Force and we are going to have the Space Force, separate but equal.
So guys, I hope you enjoyed the intro. Also, if you get a chance, go ahead and click the thumbs up button. And if you're not a subscriber, consider joining the channel. But yeah, guys, every day they are pumping 24/7 news stories, new news leaks about UFOs. I mean, they're getting the world ready and prepared for the return of the Babylonian and Egyptian gods. It's something that you guys have to understand. The media is owned by 5 or 6 companies. And these companies that own majority of the media are these elite bloodline families. And so they have editors in place, they have reporters in place, they have news anchors in place who are part of Operation Mockingbird. If you guys want to find out more about that, scroll back through my channel. I did 3 videos called TV News or TV Media, How They Trick You. Watch all 3 of those episodes and you will understand what Operation Mockingbird is. But it's an elaborate conspiracy to convince the people that we have aliens coming from another solar system into our atmosphere. I mean, as I was getting ready to put up this video, I saw this, and it talks about this astrophysicist from Harvard who's searching for what is alleged to be a downed UFO craft 100 miles off the coast of New Guinea. And so far, they said this happened in 2014, and they're still looking for it. So they've spent millions of dollars looking for something, and they, of course, haven't found anything yet. Go figure, because we're in, what, 2023? And they said this thing crashed in 2014. So I don't know, guys, but I have an interview that I want to share with you guys. It's from a different astrophysicist, and he gives his take on UFOs traveling from another solar system into our atmosphere. So take a look at this, and also remember to pray without ceasing. Until my next video, thank you, take care, God bless to you and your family.
All right, Dr. Hugh Ross, thank you so much for being with us today. I'm going to jump right into the first question. Now, selfishly, I'm asking you questions that I am desperate to hear your answer on because I respect you so much, not just intellectually, but also spiritually, which is so unique about your life. But recently, the Wall Street Journal reported that, according to U.S. intelligence reports, UFO sightings have increased in the past 2 years. So from a scientific perspective, from a spiritual perspective, is there any validity to these reports? I know so many people are asking the question, is there life outside of the planet?
Well, 2 years ago is when the U.S. government and several European governments basically released a lot of classified material on UFOs. And, that sparked a lot of interest in UFOs. So I'm not at all surprised that they're getting more reports, because it's on people's radar screen. And I'm not seeing anything in the new reports that's distinctly different from what's been happening over the past 100 years. But yes, it is true that they are getting more reports. mainly because people are reporting it. I mean, a lot of people I talk to have had UFO encounters and they've never talked to anybody about it.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And so what do you make of these reports? How do you explain it from a scientific perspective? Because, you know, there's so much bad information online. What would you say? What is this UFO phenomenon?
Well, I was an amateur astronomer before I became a professional astronomer. And as an amateur, I always wound up with a job of dealing with the UFO reports that would come into our astronomy club or the universities where I was studying. So without any intent on my part, I wound up becoming an expert on UFOs. And I can tell you that about 99% of what people report to me as UFOs are phenomena that are naturally explained, they're hoaxes, or it's secret military activity that's going on. When I look at the 1% residual, it has the property of defying the laws of physics, and yet in many cases we can prove that the phenomena is real. We're dealing with non-physical reality. And I took a course from Carl Sagan when I was at the University of Toronto. He was extremely dismissive of UFOs, but that was because his worldview would not tolerate the possibility of non-physical reality. As a Christian, my worldview does tolerate that possibility. I mean, God created another realm, independent of the universe, for the angels. And so what we see in this 1% residual, for example, is UFOs coming through our atmosphere at 5 to 18,000 miles per hour, but the witnesses never report a sonic boom. They never report any evidence of heat friction behind the UFO. If this was a physical craft coming through our atmosphere, you would get easily heard sonic booms. So, for example, when this space shuttle comes through our atmosphere, you get 2 loud sonic booms, and you see this trail of heat friction. We don't see that with the UFOs, but there's 2,000 documented cases where observers see the UFO going through the atmosphere and it crashes into the Earth. And when you go to the crash site, you actually see a shallow crater. If there's snow, the snow is melted. The vegetation is damaged. But when you investigate the crater site, you can't find any artifacts or debris. Again, if it's a physical craft, there would be debris. There would be some physical artifacts that people could pick up. We don't see that. And then what's coming out with these new reports from the Navy and the Air Force is these pilots actually seeing these UFOs turning sharp right angle corners or acute angles at 5 to 25,000 miles per hour. No physical object can withstand those G-forces. It would shatter. So we're dealing with non-physical reality.
Wow. That's absolutely mind-blowing. And I want to focus on that phrase, non-physical reality. Now, having said that, do you see any kind of connection between occult activity and UFO sightings? Because if we can eliminate the variable of this is physical, we know it's not physical, it's not possible. And when you clearly establish that, then the next step is what connection between occult activity, supernatural, spiritual activity, maybe clandestine, dark activity, and UFO sightings have you seen?
Well, I'm the one Christian as an astrophysicist that's written on this phenomena, but I know of 5 others who've spent at least a decade studying the UFO phenomena who are not believers, but they agree with me that we're dealing with something beyond the space-time dimensions of the universe. The French astrophysicist Jacques Vallée, who's put the most research into the UFO phenomena, says we're dealing with interdimensional beings. Now, from a Christian perspective, we would recognize that angels are interdimensional beings. And this is where I think the research on close encounters is important. It was Alan Hynek, the American astrophysicist, who came up with this term, close encounters of the first kind, second kind, third kind. Well, a close encounter is where the human contactee is less than 500 feet from the UFO phenomena. And then, the second kind is where they actually have communication. Third kind is where there's actual contact. And what we notice in these close encounters, in no case is it beneficial for the human contactee. It's always deleterious. The best you're going to come away with from a close encounter is recurring, terrifying nightmares. What's the worst case scenario? People have been killed by these encounters. So injuries and death has happened. More commonly, it's the death or the injury of the animals that are associated with the human contactee. And so we're not dealing with something that's beneficial. We're dealing with something that's harmful. And then when you look at those cases where a communication has come from these UFO beings to the human contactee, number one, their astronomy is never accurate.
Right.
It impresses the human contactee who's not educated in astronomy, but it's always inaccurate. And moreover, the phenomena always keeps pace with our advancing technology. And signs of deception. And that where there is actual verbal communication taking place, a famous incident is where the human contactee was put into a trance and then began to write a book. It's called the Urantia book. And it's the Bible of several UFO cult religions. It's almost 4,000 pages long, and a third of the content of the Urantia book is focused on denying the deity of Jesus Christ.
Wow.
You're a pastor, you should be able to figure out, okay, if that's what's going on, we're dealing with the fallen angels, because this fits what the Bible tells us about the motivation of the fallen angels, the demons.
Wow. That is just such an incredible insight. And it makes total sense because as you take even a logical scientific journey now, you can see, okay, we have to rule out a physical phenomenon, but that doesn't mean it's not any less real. It's just operating in another dimension and we're interacting with it. Then you look at the consequences and then you take all the studies that coupled with that and you see a very clear, and I hate to use this phrase, but I think it's apropos, like anti-Christ. And so even in that, so wow.
Oh yeah, don't forget the Germans, the Thule Society, the Vril Society, the Anunnaki. They're channeling to build these anti-gravity crafts through demonic seances. The Germans.
Quite a story, and it comes from the man who headed Israel's space security program for nearly 30 years. Chaim Eshed is making the extraordinary claim that the United States and Israel have been in contact with a group of aliens for years, not immigrants, but extraterrestrials. He has called them the Galactic Federation of Aliens, and he says President Trump is aware of the existence of these aliens and had been on the verge of revealing their secrets, he claims, but was asked not to do so by the Federation in order to prevent what he calls mass hysteria. Well, the retired general says the US and Israel have kept it from the public because, quotes, humanity isn't ready and the aliens don't want to reveal themselves until humanity can evolve, he says, and understand what space really is. Well, the good news is that he claims an agreement has been reached between the US government and the aliens, a contract to do experiments here. There's also, he says, a secret underground base on Mars where there are American and alien representatives. Now, this former head of a branch of Israel's defense ministry is 87. He was very well respected. He says he's come forward now in the hope that his news will be accepted as true. He notes that if he'd made these claims 5 years ago, he would have been hospitalized, but now he says, I've got nothing to lose. Well, so far, President Trump has not tweeted about this, though remember a year ago, he did set up the Space Force as the fifth branch of the US Armed Forces. Well, we did ask the White House, the Department of Defense and Israeli officials to comment. So far, they have not responded to the NBC News request, and I wonder if they ever will.
before you leave office, will you let us know if there's aliens? Because this is the only thing I really want to know. I want to know what's going on. Would you ever open up Roswell and let us know what's really going on there?
So many people ask me that question.
I know, it sounds almost ridiculous, but it's actually the real question I want to know.
It sounds like a cute question, but it's actually, there are millions and millions of people that want to go there, that want to see it. I won't talk to you about what I know about it, but it's very interesting. But Roswell's a very interesting place with a lot of people that would like to know what's going on.
So you're saying you may declassify?
Oh.
You'll take it?
Well, I'll have to think about that one, right?
I'll have
to think. You know, I'm proud to have that German blood. There's no question about it. Great stuff.